What's going on, guys? Aarava here. Welcome back to another F1 2016 video today, and we're going to be discussing the R&D upgrades and just talking about perhaps what will be the best kind of strategy for you guys in career mode, depending on different teams, what different kind of cars you're in, and what the strategy might be. Of course, this is all subject to change because also Codemasters have stated that the values of the R&D upgrades and perhaps the amount of XP you earn during practice sessions might be subject to change for the full game. So this is from the preview build. So if you do watch this later on in the future while you're doing your career mode, just remember that it might have changed a little bit in terms of how much it actually costs to get you the different upgrades. But for now, we're going to discuss it and see what the best kind of strategy might be. So for now, we're going to start off this video with the kind of bottom teams. The lower three, Renault, Sauber, Manor, they're all going to be very similar in terms of what we might want to upgrade on the car. As you can clearly see, all three of the bars on the right-hand side of there, Renault, Sauber, and Manor, are quite further down to that next car up, which is the Haas Formula 1 team. So we're going to be talking about that. I did the R&D kind of practice test just now in the Renault. I actually got so close to getting a perfect score on the freaking track acclimatization. I got one green out of purple, which really pissed me off. I posted it on Twitter and it just infuriated me, but we got very, very close, and that means we've got 481 resource points. So let's round up to 500, because you might have 500 if you do other things as well. So let's say you have 500 to play with for the Renault, the Sauber, and the Manor car. We're going to look at what you actually need. So obviously, Renault and Sauber, they're going to be a little bit down on power. Renault especially. Manor, you would think they're not so down on power because they're in a Mercedes, they've got a Mercedes engine, but the way the game works in terms of the performances, the Manor doesn't necessarily have the rocket ship straight line speed like it does in real life necessarily, and it will be a little bit down on power compared to the actual Mercedes Works team, Mercedes AMG. So in all three cases, it's a case of what you actually want to get for your money. Let's say I'm just gonna refer to it as money because it's just easy instead of saying resource points all the time. But what you're gonna spend your money on basically for the R&D upgrades, because if you go for power, you're still gonna have a lack of downforce because obviously these lower cars, they lack downforce. The Renault especially, you know, when I just drove it around, it did feel like a bit of a bust in the corners. So you might want to be a bit clever because an engine costs 300 points. That's quite a lot. If I spend 300, let's say if I have 500 points, I only have 200 left, and that means I could only maybe possibly get the fuel efficiency one, which costs 150 right now. So you get two upgrades there, but to be honest, you can see the little bar on the right-hand side when I go over fuel efficiency. If you can see, I'll try and zoom in on the video, but you can see it's a tiny little amount that you're upgrading for fuel efficiency. Engine's quite a lot for the Renault, a hefty chunk, but if we go down to things like chassis weight and also downforce, you can see downforce probably the same amount as the engine, I would say, but it looks like chassis weight is going to be your biggest gain for the Renault car, and indeed the Sauber and the Manor car, because the chassis weight, what you're doing there is making the entire car lighter. So immediately you're going to boost your straight line speed because the car is going to be lighter. At the same time as well, the actual cornering and everything might feel a lot better because you're not going to be kind of like clunked down basically. You're not going to be dragged down by the weight of your chassis a little bit more, and the car might feel a little better in the corners. And then you got to consider also the price. 300 points for chassis weight, 300 for engine cost, and it clearly looks like that chassis weight gives you a little bit more. If I just look with my own two eyes, I think, just about visually, I think chassis weight looks like to give you a little bit more than engine power, at least for the Renault car. So it looks like chassis one might be the best way to go. So that's how you spend 300 on the chassis. You then got 200 points. Let's say if I round up from 481 to 500, you've got 200 to spend. What are you going to spend on? Let's say, okay, if you did, I only did the track acclimatization, and track acclimatization got me 50 points. If you do the other two, which gets you 50 and 50, you'll get another 100 points on top of that. So let's say you're left with 550, or, you know, even 600 if you do everything else. You might be able to then afford things like drag, which will then improve your straight line speed even more. So if you're in a car like Manor, or even let's go to McLaren Honda, you know, they're not in the same tier as these three lower cars, but if you were in McLaren, you could reduce the chassis weight and reduce the drag if you did all the sessions in the little practice FP1 and FP2 and FP3. And if you had enough points, you could then spend what is 550 in the first weekend. Bang, get in there, reduce the weight, reduce the drag. So that's a double case of improving your straight line speed. By also reducing the chassis weight, you're also going to improve just the general drivability of the car. And then you can maybe look into downforce. But at the same time, flip verse, you might be more comfortable with being able to chop the car around into the corner better and just, you know, kind of deal with the fact that you're slow on the straights. I know that you could probably actually gain more time you know, in the corners perhaps, than the straight line speed for a team like Renault or Sauber or Manor. Maybe McLaren, Honda, they've already got a bit better downforce, as I shown in my other video when I did it around Hockenheim. The downforce of the McLaren wasn't really that bad, so really, when you're in a McLaren, you might want to spend a lot on kind of engine power and chassis weight, but for Renault, felt like a bus in the corners. You also might want to consider downforce, because it's not too bad. If you look at the actual performance little gain, you can see it's pretty similar to the engine, actually maybe a little bit more in fact. So the downforce is not something you have to think of, but downforce, the most expensive one, 350. Obviously, we know in real life Formula 1, downforce is king, apart from the engine power in this new V6 era, but downforce is a very expensive thing, you know. R&D upgrades, we've seen Sauber struggling to bring upgrades in real life F1 because it is a real challenge, so you might want to think about downforce there as well. But for a team like Renault, Sauber, and Manor, I'm going to say that I think the best strategy, personally, to me, looks like reducing your chassis weight. And then it's a case of, if you've got enough points, you can maybe think about doing a downforce upgrade at the first race or the second race, and then, or vice versa, you could do the drag update, which costs you less. So you could probably do the drag and chassis weight in one go on the first race weekend. But remember, it's going to take you some time to actually see that upgrade. You know, for a team like Renault, Sauber, and Manor, I believe the lower teams take longer to bring the upgrades. I think that's how it works. I'm not too sure, because obviously we can't play further than round 4 in this career mode preview build, so I think that's how it works. The lower teams take a bit longer, so just remember that as well, that even though you are spending those points, it is going to take a little bit longer for the lower teams to actually receive those. So you might receive them around, I don't know, round 3, maybe even round 4, maybe if you're Manor or Sauber, but I think that's probably going to be the best strategy for the lower teams. You go with the chassis weight, and then either downforce and drag, leave the engine power, fuel efficiency alone. I think you leave fuel efficiency and engine power maybe to a team like McLaren, Honda, maybe Red Bull, because Red Bull, that's one thing that we've seen. If you you know, if you drive the Red Bull, you just seen videos of the Red Bull car in this preview build. It is down on straight line speed compared to the Mercedes, but in the corners, it's really good. It catches up to the Merc just like real life. So if you're in something like Red Bull, it could be more worth for you to upgrade the engine straight off the bat, because your downforce is already there. And for a team like Mercedes, if you want to play as Mercedes, I mean, there might be some people who do, who want to keep them at the top, because obviously every other team would be trying to chase you. Fuel efficiency will definitely be maybe something you need to look at, because it might make it easier for you in the race. If you don't need to worry about fuel, you can actually use that pace in the Mercedes a lot better, be in rich mix a lot longer, and it's going to be better for you in the race. So there's a lot of different variables to actually think of when you're in different teams, but for like the bottom teams right now, I'm thinking chassis, downforce, drag will probably be the best option for you guys. I'm now actually going to skip on. If we move on to the very other end of the spectrum, Mercedes AMG, the very top, one thing I want to point out straight away is I did not do any of the practice sessions, in the actual activities, and resource points are on 510. So just by being Mercedes, I've earned more from practice by doing nothing. You get more for doing less, because you're in a higher team. Obviously, your team naturally will incur, you know, money, if you will. Like, I keep saying money for resource points because it's just the easiest way. I played too much Forza and Need for Speed in the past. It just seems like money, basically. But as a top team, you have to do less, and you'll get more points than if you worked harder in lower teams. And obviously, it's the way real F1 works. You know, the real F1 teams, you know, the lower ones, they have to work very, very hard and still get a minor return compared to the big teams that can just really push big. But you can see as well for Mercedes now, if you look closely, 500 points for engine power. So although you have more points, everything is a lot more expensive, because obviously Mercedes, it's the, you know, what's the phrase, the diminishing returns, basically, theory, that, you know, you're right at the top, so you're going to have to put a lot of money to get a little bit back out, because you can see engine power just seems a lot less than what Renault was. If you look down the order, fuel efficiency very tiny, you know, chassis weight, downforce, and also the drag, you know, they seem about maybe just a little bit less than Renault, but the thing is, it costs so much more to get this little bit less than Renault, so it all adds up to just being a lot harder to actually keep on improving the car. So you'll have teams like Ferrari, Red Bull, Williams chasing after you the entire time, trying to catch up to you. So for a team like Mercedes, you know, it looks like straight away engine, something like engine or downforce. I think downforce and engine look about the same. visually to upgrade from, and that would be kind of the case because obviously Mercedes, the top teams like Ferrari, are all chasing down downforce. You know, we've seen at the German Grand Prix, Ferrari admitting that they just haven't made enough downforce gains. It's a big deal for the top teams, whereas the bottom teams, McLaren, you know, they need to work on fuel efficiency and engine power outright. You know, Renault, Sauber, they have to do the same thing. You know, a team like Manor also chasing downforce, but at the top, at the very, very top, you're chasing fine margins of downforce, and that's a thing that kind of translates to the game quite nicely. The fact that downforces are the same thing there as engine power, but it looks like from a top team perspective, something like downforce or engine power might be the best option. Engine power is really expensive though, 500, that's quite a lot, so you may be worth off doing downforce, and then perhaps, I'm not too sure, maybe look into either chassis weight or drag, which look about maybe the same. I think chassis weight gets it about enough, and then from what I can tell, throughout this entire video, in terms of looking at everything and so the different teams, it looks like the best bang for your buck upgrade that I'm going to tell you guys to do in career mode, if you're always struggling to like what to do, is going to be chassis weight. That looks like the best bang for your buck upgrade, whatever team you're doing, no matter what team you're doing. I think that's going to be the best bet if you just don't have any clue what to really do, because also at the same time, take into account your own driving style, and you know, if you feel like you're understeering quite a lot, you might want to whack on downforce instead of engine power. Or if you feel like you can gain a lot on the straights and you're already fine in the corners, then put on engine power. But also just remember then, if you have a lot of engine power, let's say you're a McLaren, let's say if you do like 3 engine upgrades and you don't spend anything on downforce, you're then going to end up having a car that can't handle that power on the traction out of corners, through the corners, because it doesn't have enough downforce to actually push the car down with this new extra power. It was like in the real life season in 2015, you know, McLaren going from Australia to Malaysia, where you know, obviously they had that really, really poor weekend where Button just about finished at the Australian Grand Prix. Moving to Malaysia, they said they massively improved the power output of the Honda, but you saw no real huge gain, because the thing is, they improved it, but all that did was spin up the rear tyres even more, because they were still lacking in downforce, and they still weren't right up there to that maximum top speed, where the downforce then starts to get produced at higher speeds. So they've tried to kind of play into that a little bit, because I remember from March, that was the question I asked in terms of, you know, is it actually going to affect things like that? And Lee Mather did say that if you're in the McLaren or a lower car and you do put way too much effort into engine power, you might see that the fact that you're really struggling then to actually keep the power down, you need to then really concentrate on downforce. So that's something you also need to think about, a balancing act and your own setup wise. But it looks like that's how it's going to be. You know, the bottom teams, you want to go for, you know, chassis weight, downforce, drag straight away. Maybe engine power if you're someone like McLaren, Honda, Sauber, or Renault. Maybe Manor, as I said, to an extent, Manor are down on power a little bit because they need to make them but they need to drop their top line speed just to make them that bad for the AI. And then the top teams, worth probably doing chassis weight again, downforce, engine power probably not. It's really expensive. In my mind, engine power for someone like Mercedes, maybe even Ferrari, perhaps, you know, probably only Red Bull to, not even Williams, Red Bull, McLaren, and probably the likes of the people who are really going to actually benefit from engine power, and a lot of it, whereas Mercedes, Ferrari, probably want to concentrate on other things there. But that's just been my little overview, by no means a kind of in-depth kind of tip guide for it. Hopefully, you know, once I do a season or two of career mode myself in the full career mode, not the preview build, then hopefully I can come back to this video, basically revisit this idea, and maybe give you a more in-depth actual real analysis of what I think the best picks can be. But from the preview build, what I've seen right now looks like your best bet for bang for buck, chassis weight, and you've got the kind of general gist of the pattern of what you want to do for different teams. But hope you guys have found that video informative in some way. I wanted to do something about career mode, but obviously, unlike others, I don't want to actually play career mode myself. I want to really keep it I want to keep the kind of experience of doing the race weekends for the very first career mode I do, which, by the way, I'm going to announce the team I'm going to be doing for that career mode later on, hopefully maybe in this week or the next week. We've still got some time till the release date, so I will just eventually do it. But I know a lot of you guys have been wondering what career mode team I'm going to do. Eventually I will announce that, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed that kind of career mode related video. I thought it'd be quite interesting, and I think it's going to be maybe somewhat useful at the launch. Hopefully, as I said, I'll be able to make a more useful video later on down the line, maybe in September. But guys, if you haven't found that video informative or just interesting, hit that like button, would really appreciate it. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. If you're new around here, then do subscribe for weekly Formula 1 content. I've been over, hope you enjoy the rest of the day, and I'll see you guys next time.